People, I hear how great Paul Pimsleur is and how great his method is. I'm not here saying it's a bad product, but I do have a wake-up call for you. Henry Ford died in 1947. He didn't invent the latest Mustang. Joseph Pilates died in 1967. His system was designed for wounded soldiers. Paul Pimsleur died in 1976, 50 years ago. When Paul Pimsleur was designing his language method, he was working with reel-to-reel magnetic audio tapes and cassette decks. He never saw a floppy disk. He never saw a computer monitor with text on it. He never conceived of an app, a website, a user interface, or even a digital subscription model. So this is my first thing. Those languages you're learning on the Paul Pimsleur website, well, most of them are not his work. Are any of them his own work? Who knows? Maybe they took his 50-year-old handwritten parchments off his desk and turned them into a computer app. Who knows? It would be easy to say that it's all too old-fashioned because Paul Pimsleur, the Paul Pimsleur website, does actually use AI without exactly explaining how it adds to the Pimsleur principles, which is very interesting, really. Pimsleur's work was good enough to build a legacy upon, but you can improve on it? How does that work exactly? So you brought in a series of people with PhDs to examine his work, or can just anyone overwrite the work of a university professor? I thought the whole interest was that he was a university professor with these far-reaching ideas on language learning. But before we go any further, let's examine the possible reasons for Paul Pimsleur's success in the 60s. Well, first of all, let us remember that Pimsleur was improving on nothing. He was improving on nothing. Second language acquisition, SLA, as a recognized empirical scientific discipline, did not even exist in Pimsleur's time. So Pimsleur was doing his research in the early 60s, so he was essentially better than nothing. So his big invention, I'm really having fun with this, his big invention was the gradual interval recall. Groundbreaking in the 60s. What were the 60s synonymous for? What were the 60s synonymous for? Experiments on the brain's abilities, perhaps? When Paul Pimsleur published his gradual interval recall data, I think it was 1967, he was working in the exact same cultural and scientific landscape that birthed some of the most famous, intense and controversial brain experiments in human history. He was working within a trend, is what I would like you to understand. He was working within a trend, a way of thinking, because science has trends, they have currents. And here are just a few of them. Press pause to read. Interesting read, isn't it? So I'm not saying that Paul Pimsleur is a sort of mad inventor who believed in some quack theories about brain hacking that were fashionable in his time. But I am saying that that stuff was cutting edge 50 years ago, and that it was new at the time, and that the languages you are buying on Pimsleur today were not designed by him. So what are you buying? Oh, but there's a method, of course. There's a method, and his legacy lives on through that method. And the people today have simply applied his brilliant method to a number of languages. They're actually selling 50 languages, and if I have my facts straight, Paul Pimsleur published at the most 5 or 6 languages in the 60s. And it's quite funny because as a true specialist of English to French, that's what I do, I know that each language is taught specifically to the learner's native language according to the specifics of the language you're teaching. French has specifics. that you have to take into account. French is taught in a certain way relative to that language, and German in a different way still. But Pimsleur, being the genius he is, just said, no, we can teach any language in the same way, following the same method, and regardless of what the learner speaks. And by the way, how does he treat conditioning? Conditioning from the learner when they approach their very first lesson. Because I find it odd that this great man of science doesn't seem to take into account the effect of conditioning on the learner. So I posted a video recently that explained that if you've had 2, 3 or more unsuccessful experiences learning French, you're closing those doors each time behind you, and you're developing the wrong idea of what it means to learn a language and a wrong idea about what French is supposed to look like. You can never go back ever again to that optimal state of learning. Pimsleur doesn't seem to worry about that. Doesn't even mention it. The quote that stands proudly on the Paul Pimsleur website is, "Probably no aspect of learning a foreign language is more important than memory. Yet, no aspect of language learning has been less well examined. Dr. Paul Pimsleur." Wow, earth-shattering, earth-shattering. Yeah, so in other words, to speak you have to remember words. Is that it? And essentially he's saying that he's working on memory. Excuse me, that doesn't seem to have anything to do with the self, with metacognition, or with linguistics. And still from the website they add, the Pimsleur method is the foundation upon which every Pimsleur course is built. The foundation? Why not the house? What part of the foundation exactly? They also say our language learning method focuses on your natural speaking and listening skills to learn the English language like a child. When you first learned your native tongue, you didn't read, study or take grammar lessons. You practiced speaking the language after hearing people speak. End of quote. It's really surprising to me to see this on a website, on a professional product, because it's usually the sort of thing you see in YouTube comments, the sort of enfant sauvage, the feral child approach. Mowgli of the jungle, raised by wolves, learning languages. They then go on to say these surprisingly simple language learning techniques, active, collaborating, robust participation and inherent curiosity is what our learning system is all about and is simply the best way to learn a new language. I love how they go from scientifically proven and researched to the best, which is just about as far from a scientific conclusion as you can get. We are the best. Still from the website, Dr. Pimsleur's research on memory was perhaps one of his most revolutionary achievements. He discovered that if learners were reminded of new words at gradually increasing intervals each time, they would remember longer than the time before. End of quote. Now the problem is, a language isn't a series of words. So excuse me, but this is a stupid idea, and I don't see how it leads to any sort of linguistic autonomy or deep understanding of a language. It may be great for a deck of cards, but language isn't a deck of cards. Still from the website, Dr. Pimsleur documented the optimal spacing for information to move from short-term into long-term or permanent memory. Graduated interval recall mirrors the easy, natural way a child learns a new language, and we've incorporated these intuitive language study methods into our courses and lessons. This theory is at the base of all the Pimsleur programs. Yeah, right, I like to work within reality because my customers live in reality, so I'm very wary of theories. So he took hundreds of children, studied their language learning across hundreds of families, maybe used what research was available at the time, before the internet. Keep in mind this was all before the internet, where you can bet you didn't have the databases to know who was researching what in different countries. So he supposedly monitored those children from ages 0 to 10, okay? and he drew a series of conclusions that he then adapted to his system. You see, I like to think very practically. How many hundreds of kids did you study to be able to say how the average child learns? What does it even mean to learn like a child? Are we considering that all children are the same? Who did he study exactly? Then there's the principle of anticipation, still from the website. The principle of anticipation. Our brains are hardwired to automatically process speech and anticipate a correct response. Yeah, well, in the sense that we don't speak alone. Yeah. Next quote. Dr. Pimsleur's research demonstrated that new connections are activated whenever this dynamic system is triggered. So in other words, when there's a message and an answer, you learn something, okay? That's what it means. They also tell us by systematically asking for understanding, pausing for a response, and then reinforcing the correct response, Pimsleur's courses accelerate learning, increase understanding, and activate new neural pathways in the learner's brain. End of quote. Which is the same thing with more words. They're just repeating the same thing with more words. Essentially, if you practice this enough, you'll learn faster than if you don't. And by the way, you notice the mention of neural pathways of the brain in typical 1960s fashion. They also tell us the principle of anticipation is one of the best language learning techniques. End of quote. Again, the word best. Wait, I thought you people were all about science. Next quote, it's all about neural coding knowledge, actually improving thinking and memory skills to assist in new language acquisition. End of quote. I love the 1960s jargon here. The research into the depth of the brain. And the very last quote, with Pimsleur, you'll actually boost your brain power with specifically proven language learning tools and resources. End of quote. We've come full circle. Here they're just saying, accept him. We're going to boost your brain power in some way. And the rest of the website is just typical positioning against things that no one would ever do anyway, such as memorizing vast quantities of random words. You know, it's a technique I often see in language teaching, you know, when you want to promote yourself. I've seen it again and again. We don't do the stupid thing over there that no one would do anyway. We rather do the clever thing over here that's the opposite of the stupid thing. Okay, so my final word on Paul bloody Pimsleur. Number one, Pimsleur did not design whatever you'll find on that website. The man is dead, has been dead for 50 years. Perhaps they did use some of his notes from the 5 or 6 languages he used to teach, but now they have 50, so work that out for yourself. Number two, I find it more memory-based than anything else. He seemed to be a memory hacker than exactly a language teacher. I don't see any mention of linguistics or anything, or metacognition and such things. Number three, I did not see a single word, as I said, about metacognition, which is very important for myself, and understanding the linguistic system of a language. Number four, I did not see a single word about observing your own practice as a student. Number five, I saw a lot of 1960s pseudo brain hack stuff that were scientifically proven, they tell us, and they are supposedly the absolute best in what they do. If you love it, use it, have fun. It's all I can say. Have fun. I don't know, Paul Pimsleur, bless the man. My name's Chris from We Communicate. I look forward to your comments. I'm not saying it's a bad product. I'm not saying it doesn't work. Do what you want.